The Alps. They're a landscape of pure myth and majesty, right? A place of serene beauty, but also just immense power. The story of the Alps is one of these dramatic extremes, forged by the fire of colliding continents and then sculpted by the slow, grinding power of ice. So let's get into this incredible story of creation and change. And right at the heart of this story is one single peak, the Matterhorn. I mean, it's the mountain you picture when you think of mountain, a perfect pyramid of rock that just seems to defy time itself. For centuries, it's been this powerful symbol of permanence and raw, natural grandeur. But here's the twist. This icon of eternity, it's now caught in a moment of change that is completely unprecedented. The very forces that defined it for millions of years are literally being rewritten in a matter of decades. Now, before we get into all the science, you just can't understand the Alps without understanding their place in our imagination. They aren't just rocks, they're a massive cultural landmark. Think about this. The first successful ascent of the Matterhorn back in 1865 was way more than just a climb. It really marked the symbolic peak of the golden age of alpinism, that decade when climbers first conquered the great alpine summits, transforming them from these terrifying obstacles into objects of human ambition and adventure. But to really get to know this mountain, we have to go back. I mean, way, way back. Before the climbers, before humanity even existed, to a time when the world looked completely different. You see, the Alps weren't always here, not even close. They were actually born from a slow-motion collision of tectonic plates. As you can see on this map from about 170 million years ago, the opening of the Atlantic created this huge body of water between what would become Africa and Eurasia, the Piedmont Ocean. And then, everything reversed. Over tens of millions of years, those plates started pushing back together. Around 35 million years ago, the continents finally collided, and the immense pressure just began to crumple and thrust the Earth's crust upwards, forming the mountain range that we see today. Now, geologists have this fantastic word for what happened next: nappes. It's French for tablecloth. Just imagine pushing a tablecloth across a table. It wrinkles and folds over on itself. Now imagine that tablecloth is a sheet of rock hundreds of kilometers wide. That's pretty much how the Alps were built. And this diagram here of the Glarus thrust in Switzerland, it just brilliantly shows the sheer scale of those forces. If you look closely at that cross-section, you can actually see how a massive sheet of older rock was pushed more than 50 kilometers right on top of younger rock layers. It's a landscape that was literally turned upside down. So we've been talking in millions of years, but now the clock is accelerating big time. The story of the Alps today is being written not in geological eons, but in human lifetimes. Over the 20th century, average temperatures in the Alps shot up by 2 degrees Celsius. Now, I know that number might sound kind of small, but in a delicate mountain ecosystem like this, it is a seismic shift. And to put that number in context, this warming is double the average increase for the entire northern hemisphere. The Alps are a true climate change hotspot. They're experiencing the effects faster and more intensely than almost anywhere else. And here's the problem. There's a dangerous feedback loop at play. White snow and ice, they act like a giant mirror, reflecting the sun's heat back into space. But as they melt, they expose the dark rock underneath, which soaks up that heat instead, warming the ground and, well, causing even more melting. It's a cycle that just keeps feeding itself. This rapid warming isn't just some abstract number either. It's actively pulling apart the delicate web of life that has adapted to these mountains over thousands and thousands of years. Think of it this way. For every half a degree of warming, plants and animals have to migrate 100 meters uphill just to stay in the same climate conditions. With temperatures rising so quickly, many species are caught in this desperate race against time, and it's a race some are already losing. The most visible casualties of all this? The glaciers. Since the mid-19th century, they've lost half their volume. These are the water towers of Europe, feeding major rivers that sustain agriculture and industry for millions of people. And they are literally vanishing right before our eyes. But there's an even more sneaky threat melting just underground. Permafrost, that permanently frozen ground that acts like cement for mountain faces, is thawing out. This makes the mountains physically unstable, which leads to more frequent and more dangerous rockfalls. By 2100, the altitude where the ground stays frozen all year could climb by another 700 meters. So, this environmental crisis is, maybe unsurprisingly, triggering an economic one. For the communities that depend on these mountains, the changing climate is threatening their entire way of life. So let's talk numbers. What's the real price of a shrinking winter? Both for the Alps and really for the global economy that depends on them. Well, first, just consider the scale. Europe, and specifically the Alps, is the undisputed king of global skiing. It hosts a staggering 62% of all skier visits worldwide. That's most of them. That dominance translates into an estimated 34 billion euros every single year. As the backbone of this whole industry, drawing almost half the world's skiers, the Alps aren't just a destination for sport, they're a massive economic engine. And this is the part that's truly astonishing. The money from skiing doesn't just go to the lift company. For every €1 spent on a lift pass, another 6 are spent in the local economy, on hotels, on restaurants, shops, guides. The entire community depends on it.
So, with the ice melting and the economy under threat, what does the future actually hold for this iconic landscape?
The path forward is really a combination of resilience and realism. Communities are diversifying, building up summer tourism with stuff like hiking and biking. They're innovating with more sustainable technologies. And crucially, they're beginning to adapt, which means accepting the really hard truth that for some low-lying resorts, the era of winter sports might just be coming to an end. The Alps took over 100 million years to build, a testament to the slow, immense power of the planet. But the story of their future and the fate of the cultures and ecosystems that depend on them, that story is going to be written in just the next few decades. The question really isn't what happened anymore. It's what are we going to do next?